What's up, everybody? This is Whiskey in the Six. I'm Rob. Christmas is around the corner. It's difficult enough buying whiskey for yourself, choosing a whiskey from the various options that you have at a liquor store. What's even harder is choosing a whiskey for somebody else. What I'm going to do in this video is try to give you guys some options in different ranges. So under $50, under $100, under $200, and then $200 and above. Hopefully this gives you an idea of what's a good whiskey to buy out there and why you should buy it. So under $50, I'm going to start with number 3, Larceny Kentucky Bourbon. The reason why I think this is a great bourbon to buy for under $50 is you can pretty much get it for around that price range anywhere in North America, and it's available in most markets. It's easily accessible. It's a nice bourbon that has a good wheat sweetness to it. If you like a wheated bourbon but you don't want to wait for a Weller 12 or a Pappy, then that's the option for you, and that would be a great gift for someone that really enjoys bourbon, especially. Number 2 on my list under $50 would be Lot 40. That's not the Lot 40 cask strength that recently came out. That one is going to be too hard to find for most people. What I would recommend though is its lower ABV brother, Lot 40 at 43%. This one goes for around 40 Canadian in most markets, and it's a really nice 100% rye whiskey. Next up, I would say available in all markets, the best bang for your buck single malt whiskey under $50 would be a Tomatin Legacy. This is a steal at around $40 Canadian, depending on where you are in Canada, as well as around like 35 American throughout the United States. In the UK and most of Europe, it's very cheap as well, probably around 20 pounds. It's a steal. It's a fantastic whiskey, a great single malt. Some honorable mentions under $50 would be Four Rose Single Barrel, Jack Daniel's Barrel Select. Now this is a little bit more expensive at the LCBO, but I'm assuming that's the most expensive price North America wide at $55. So even around $55, that's a great whiskey for that price. And if you can still find them out there, which might be very difficult to do so, Elijah Craig 12-year-old and a Weller 12-year-old. Let's move on to our under $100 category. I'm going to start with an Indian whiskey and talk about Amrut Fusion. This is a fusion of Indian and Scottish barley comprised to make a beautiful, very low peat style whiskey. It's really sweet. It tastes much older than it actually is at around like 5 or 6 years old, just because of the subtropical climate of India, which causes the whiskey to age a lot faster. So that would be one of the best, in my opinion, under $100. Next up is a whiskey that I pretty much recommend to anyone starting with Scotch. It's the Glen 12-year-old. This is a single malt. It is unchill filtered with no added color. It's bottled at 43%. It is a beautiful whiskey. I am convinced that you'll like it. I'm convinced that whoever you buy it for will really appreciate it. Last up in this category, I want to go with the Jack Daniel's Single Barrel Proof. All right, that is a cask strength whiskey or a barrel proof whiskey, like the U.S. distilleries like to call it. Really beautiful whiskey. It does need a little bit of water because it's bottled so high at 64, depending on which one you get, which batch you get, 64% ABV. Which means only that your whiskey will last the person you buy for that much longer. Honorable mentions in this category, a whiskey that I also recommend to a lot of people. It might have some added color in it, but it's still a beautiful whiskey, the Glenfiddich Malt Masters. They're starting to become a little bit more rare because they're not going to be making it anymore. It is a limited edition, but it's really good whiskey. If you can find that, pick it up. Also, Ideally, if you're in the United States and you can pick up the 43% version of the Macallan 12-year-old double cask, it's a wicked whiskey at 43%. It does lose some substance at 40%, but anywhere in the United States you can pick up the double cask and the sherry oak, which are both beautiful whiskeys for under $100. And then last but not least, as an honorable mention, I want to mention the Glen 12-year-old, which is around $85 Canadian in Ontario, a lot cheaper everywhere else, and it's a really good whiskey. Under $200, I'm going to start with the Octomore. Bruichladdich makes a series called Octomore. I reviewed the 6.3. I had an opportunity to do a video with a gentleman from the Toronto Whiskey Society where we tasted 4 different types of Octomore. I highly recommend any one you pick up. They're really, really good. You can get them usually for under $200 unless you live in Ontario, and then sometimes it goes a little bit north of that. But for roughly $200 or less, the Octomore is a whiskey that will appease all palates despite the fact that it's heavily peated. Believe it or not, you can hate peat and still really love this whiskey. For whatever reason, there is an exception to it. Another whiskey in this category that I would really like to recommend to anybody is the Macallan Edition number 2 or number 3. These are both bottled at around 48%, and they are beautiful whiskeys, okay? They're done differently, so they can vary depending on which batch you get. There's an edition 1, edition 2, edition 3. Edition 1 is almost impossible to get unless you live in the United States in the smaller markets where it didn't fly off the shelf. But edition 2 and edition 3 are still readily available. You might want to jump on an edition 2 first because that'll be available for less a time than the edition 3, since the edition 3 hasn't hit all shelves in Canada yet. Last but not least in this category. Now again, the price is different in Ontario than it is everywhere else in the world. I was lucky enough to pick up a bottle of this for $165 in Nova Scotia. It's called the Bow Blair 1990, and it's a 25-year-old. It's bottled at 46%. It is unchill filtered with no added color. It is an incredible whiskey for under $200 if you can find it for under $200. Unfortunately, in Ontario, with all the taxes and all the other stuff that we have to deal with, you're looking at around $260 plus, which is unfortunate. But it's still worth that price tag, believe it or not. Although if you can get it in another province like Nova Scotia or Alberta, you're definitely getting your money's worth. It is one of the best priced 25-year-old Scotch single malts out there. Honorable mentions in the under $200 category. I'm gonna list this one because it should be a little bit more easily accessible this year. It's gonna be the George T. Stagg. All right, this comes out with the BTAC, usually in lottery style, but this year they made around 40,000 George T. Staggs, so it'll be an easy bourbon to pick up. They usually go for 150 Canadian, depending on where you are in Canada. They usually go for about $100 to $120 retail in the United States. Now the problem is the secondary markets on these is astronomical. So I wouldn't recommend you buy it on the secondary market, but if you can get it for under $200, it's a very good whiskey. Another honorable mention in this category would be the Glen 18-year-old. I really like it. It's one of the ones I recommend to all my friends if they're looking for something under $200. Definitely a great gift for anybody that likes single malt whiskey. Last but not least, honorable mention in this category, and the reason why these 3 are in the honorable mention category is because they're a little bit more difficult to come by. Glen 18-year-old. All right, I love this whiskey. It's a beautiful whiskey, bottled at 46%, unchill filtered, one of the nicest whiskeys I've ever tasted. Unfortunately, it's becoming harder and harder to come by, so for that reason, it's in the honorable mention category. But if you find one and you're spending around $200, don't hesitate, pick it up and buy it for a friend because it's beautiful. We are now in the $200 and over category. Now obviously you're not going to spend this amount of money for just anyone. either a business partner or a client that you're trying to impress, a relative that's very close to you and really enjoys single malt whiskey or whiskey in general. All right, I kind of gave something away there because I tend to only go towards single malts when I'm paying this amount of money. I'm gonna start with Kavalan Manzanilla Solist. This is a Taiwanese whiskey. I had an opportunity to review this a while back, and it's beautiful whiskey, okay? It's aged exclusively in Manzanilla sherry, all right? It gives it a little bit more of a salty sweetness, very chocolatey, excellent whiskey. They're always bottled at cask strength, and they're limited per cask. But if you can get a hold of it, I know they're now available in the United States. They're really expensive. This makes for a very prestigious, very nice collectible or high-end gift because it's around $500 American depending on where you buy it. All right, there's still places in Canada that sell it for around $400 Canadian. So if you can find them for that price, I highly recommend you pick one up. The next one I would say is the Glen 25-year-old. That's a beautiful whiskey. It's bottled at 48%. It's difficult to come by only if you live in Ontario. Everywhere else you should, most places are able to pick it up. I know that there's a whole bunch in Alberta, so you can pick it up from there if you have access to Alberta. In the US, these tend to go for around 400 American. Also tend to go for around 400 Canadian. You can pick them up on Master of Malt or the Whiskey Exchange. I know Master of Malt keeps them around the 400 American price range. So you can pick those up there, and they're beautiful whiskeys. Glengoyne in general is just an awesome distillery, so anything you pick up from them is going to be great, but the 25-year-old is exceptional, and it comes in a beautiful box. The bottle is right here, very nice, okay, and I have a second one of these unopened for a rainy day. Okay, my number one whiskey, $200 and above, and this goes all the way up to probably about $1,000, but it's gonna stay under the $1,000 range for at least a limited time. It may go up in the near future, but it's the Highland Park 25-year-old. All right, this is a beautiful whiskey. No need to show a picture here because I'm gonna show you the actual bottle. I have about half left that I've enjoyed with some friends so far. Everybody I've allowed to try it that enjoys single malt whiskey truly loves this whiskey. It comes in a beautiful box, makes for an incredible gift. It's under $1,000 in most places. In Ontario, it's $900, which is probably the most you're gonna spend for this whiskey. Although there are a lot of places in the United States that go for around $800 American. In Alberta, this is no longer in the $400 price range. It's now gonna be closer to the $600 and $700 price range. But still, if you're planning on spending that kind of money, and I had to recommend one whiskey to spend in that kind of money, it's this one, all right? Anything north of $500, we're talking a lot of money. That's someone very special to you, someone you're either trying to really impress or someone that you're really, really close with, and that's the bottle that's gonna do it. Highland Park 25-year-old. A couple of honorable mentions in this category go with the Glen Grandeur. That's a 25-year-old. The new one was featured in the movie Kingsman. It's the Glendronach 25-year-old Kingsman. Also, another great one, if you can still find it out there. There should be a few out there, so I highly recommend picking it up, and it'll go up in value quite a bit, is the Bruichladdich Black Art 4.1. I'm not the craziest about the 5.1, but the 4.1 was stunning to me, so I really recommend, if you can find that out there, you pick that up. That's my list. I hope this helped you guys. Probably went a little fast there, but you can rewatch this to kind of get your idea of what you plan to buy for Christmas for that special someone, or for any of the holidays coming up, because not everybody celebrates Christmas, and I'm sure gifts will be shared either way, and now you have a list to go by and be confident in when you purchase for that special someone. All right, cheers.